Endowment Chair, Kathy Lloyd, who many of you know have been the Scholarship Chair for many years. We do have a couple of housekeeping items. The workshop is being recorded, so you'll be able to get back on and review if you have any questions or can share it with others in your chapter or state. Please keep your microphones muted so that everyone can hear the presentations. And if you have any questions, please type them in the chat. The chat is being monitored and we will be sure and answer your questions. When you leave the meeting, you will be invited to take part in a quick survey. We appreciate your input. That really helps us sometimes to know what you're looking for otherwise and other things that might be of interest. One of the most important duties of the ESA Foundation Board of Directors is administering the endowments and scholarships. While the directors spend a lot of time working on this, we recognize that there are a lot of questions about the process. We hope that this workshop will help answer those questions. We are here to help, so do not hesitate to type in your questions in the chat, and we will make sure and answer those before we finish. Our first speaker this evening is Terry Rust, and she will be discussing the endowment process. Terry?
Thank you, Ann, and welcome everyone. Let's start out by discussing what is an endowment. Okay. There really are two ways to look at an endowment. An endowment description can be just that financial vehicle that nonprofit organizations use. What they use them for is to hold donations, for accepting donations of contributors, and then from there they can distribute the funds to whatever cause that they work for. We can also look at an endowment as referring to the sum total of the money that gets held in an endowment fund. So both of those ways we can look at those. Okay, next. Okay, so how does a foundation endowment get set up? Well, it's a simple process, actually. First of all, if someone is interested in establishing an endowment, they simply request the endowment paperwork from the foundation endowment chairman. Then that paperwork gets completed with name of what they want to call the endowment and some other details about the endowment itself. And then that gets mailed to ESA headquarters, along with a minimum of $100, which is, like it says, the minimum to start an endowment, although any amount over $100 can be submitted. And then what happens is that additional funds get added to the endowment over time, but it gets fully funded once it reaches $5,000. Now, something that's important to note right now is that if someone is interested in setting up an endowment that will be established post-death, and I'm being very specific about that term, specific details would need to be included in your will or trust, and a responsible person would be assigned to submit the paperwork and the funds to ESA headquarters. What often is recommended is if someone is planning on having an endowment established post-death, that they actually establish it prior to their death. And we're not saying you're on death's doorstep when you decide this, but you could decide this now. And then even with the minimum $100 to get it established, but then that makes it easier for your heirs, since the funds to the endowment can then come from anyone wishing to donate. And it's also easier for the funds that are coming from an estate. So that's something to kind of consider if your wish is to establish an endowment. Okay. Well, it's important to keep those endowment contacts up to date, and there's several reasons why. First of all, the annual statements are emailed, and the emails go to the primary contact that's listed on an endowment or provided through an updated contact change form. And we recently went through a period over the past year of requesting updated contacts. We can't mail statements if we don't have someone to reach them, and we can't assume that someone who was a contact, maybe they filled out a contact form in 2008 when they established their endowment, that's still a viable contact. So it's really important to keep those up to date. And that goes along with number two, the second one, where's over time changes occur, because as you know, emails change. You've probably changed your email several times, maybe over the last 10 years or so. Contacts decide they no longer want to oversee an endowment. It's just a responsibility that they don't want to handle anymore. We have contacts that age out. This year I've dealt with a few situations where when I've reached out to an endowment contact, I was told, well, I'm in my mid 90s and really don't want to handle it anymore. Or we have contacts that pass away. We also need those updates to update the scholarship criteria, because the endowment and the scholarship chairman may need to reach out to a contact regarding updating that criteria if a scholarship isn't receiving applicants. And this generally happens if a scholarship hasn't been receiving applicants over a period of years, not just 1 year, possibly. And then the last one is elections and appointments that affect contacts, because some state presidents and foundation counselors are designated as the primary contacts. And so they receive those annual statements so that they can report to their states. And these are generally updated every summer. So it's important that we have those at the beginning of what we consider our sorority year in September. Okay. All right. So let's talk for a moment about how scholarship amounts are determined based on funds that are in an endowment. So at the end of each fiscal year, the endowment committee determines the dollar amount and the number of scholarships to be given in the next season. These figures are then presented to the board for discussion and vote approval. But these numbers and amounts get based on each endowment's available balance, the 3-year rolling return on investment, the maximum percent of the available balance, which is the total funds minus the $5,000 restricted amount, which must remain untouched. And then any special requests made by endowers. And we've had a few endowers who have specified a limit to the dollar amount that a scholarship is offered for. And we've also had some that have requested perhaps 2 smaller scholarships be given instead of 1 larger. So these are things that help determine what the funding and the amounts might occur. So, okay. All right, let's take a look at a few frequently asked questions. Once set up, can an endower revoke the endowment? Unfortunately, no, because the name is ESA Foundation, Irrevocable Endowment. But this isn't something that commonly that happens anyway. People don't set up an endowment and then say, I take it back, okay? Next, can an endower request the ESA Foundation Board of Directors oversee the endowment to make decisions regarding it rather than themselves or others, such as their family or other ESA Foundation members? Absolutely. And the Foundation Board has been designated in a number of instances to oversee endowments. And then who should be contacted with a question about an endowment? Well, primarily the foundation endowment chairman should be the primary contact. Although questions are often asked of other board members, And there are some questions that they may be able to assist with if they have that information, but they don't have the files to answer any detailed questions. So if you have a question about an endowment and you go to a board member that's not the endowment chairman, it may just take longer because they may say, well, I'm going to have to refer this question to the endowment chairman rather than go directly. So, hopefully, you feel if you have an endowment, you feel comfortable coming to the endowment chairman and asking your questions or coming to the board. That's certainly, where we hope that you'll feel comfortable in doing. Okay, next. All right, Anne, were there any endowment questions submitted in the chat?
I haven't received any.
Okay, so now we'll move on to scholarships and hear from Kathy Lloyd.
When I started as scholarship chair, we used paper applications. Now, I drove to most IC conventions so that we didn't have to mail the 10 to 15,000 paper applications. The applications would then be given to the state counselors who would haul them back home, deliver them to the schools, and anyone interested in scholarships. Then the 10 to 15,000 applications would be mailed back to me. Now, it sure made my little post office real happy to have the mail coming through, boosting their number count. I would sort the applications by state and send them to the regionals for the first review. Then they would mail them back. And then I would sort them again by scholarships and mail them out again to the coordinators, who would do a final review and send them on to the judges. And once again, when the judges completed their process and winners were chosen, they would mail them back to me. So you can see this was a lot of mailing and waiting. So now let's fast forward to 2013. And applications, review, and judging became a totally online process. My postal carriers had mixed feelings. They didn't miss the thousands of letters that they had to deliver, but they did miss the higher numbers for the post office count. It's kind of hard to know where to start because the scholarship process just keeps cycling and overlapping. As Terry explained in the endowment portion, the endowment committee determines after the end of the fiscal year, based on their parameters, the number and dollar amount of each scholarship to be given. Then I take that information and put it together in a scholarship list for the next application season. Looks kind of like this one on your slide. Now, I know some of you may wonder why your scholarship might not be on the list like this year or maybe even last year. Well, if you have any investments, you know the past couple of years have not been kind to our investments. We do have a good history with our current investment company, but they don't control the market. So when the market is down, it lowers our 3-year rolling rate. And we have a list with fewer numbers of scholarships and less dollars per scholarship because we must protect the integrity and the longevity of our endowments. It's really very simple. The more money in an endowment, the more scholarships, and the more money for each one can be given. Now we have the list. And I send it to Chris York, who does her magic in uploading all the information to the website. And that is quite a job. When that is completed, then it is proof to make sure that all is in order for the new season. And now we're at the application period. The application period is from September the 1st through February the 1st. Unless the end date lands on a weekend, and then it will be moved either the day before or the day after. Because it's not pretty if the end date is on a weekend, because students who wait until the last minute can't contact schools or teachers to get their last minute documents in. So how do we get the word out? Headquarters staff sends out an e-blast to all persons who filled out an application last year. Then this is where you all come in and can get involved. Foundation counselors, members, relatives, friends, anyone can spread the word. We have a template with the scholarship website that you can request and have readily available to distribute to anyone you meet that might be going to school of some kind. Reach out to the public, private high schools, colleges and universities, junior and community colleges. Make sure people know that our scholarships are not just for high school students. As long as a student is in a higher education setting, they can continue to apply for our scholarships. You can mail or email an introductory letter with the website to school counselors or administrators. You can deliver them to the local schools and ask them to be given to the counselors and administrators. Because I know these days, sometimes it's hard to actually get into the schools to see those persons. You can give the letter to parents of students to be given to the counselors or administrators. School counselors and school emails and addresses are often found on the school website or at the State Department of Education for a particular state. You might want to include a copy of the document found on the website that explains why we require a $5 processing fee. We wish the processing fee was not necessary, but we are not like large corporations or companies that can absorb those expenses. For smaller nonprofits, this is not necessarily possible. The cost of maintaining a dedicated website and the financial and administrative oversight that comes with the annual scholarship check distribution, programming updates, and etc. can be quite daunting. If you receive questions from applicants, their family members, and school counselors, you can share the processing fee document and remind them that while we require the application fee, we do not require official transcripts, which can cost a student lots of dollars per transcript. In the overall process, our program can be more affordable than other scholarship programs. Groups cannot pay the processing fee for a student directly. If they want to support a student with the processing fee, they would need to reimburse the student directly or give them a prepaid credit card for the amount of that processing fee. Now it's time to start recruiting the processing team. Usually in December and January, I am contacting the current list of reviewers and judges to see if they are willing to perform those tasks again for the upcoming year and how many applications they want to review or judge. Scholarship reviewers are ESA or ESA Foundation members who do just that. They review the application, transcript, letters of recommendations to see that they meet the specific scholarship requirements and that the documents are acceptable. As I stated above, we do not require an official transcript. If the transcript document contains the student's name, the school's name, along with their GPA information, we consider it acceptable. Two letters of recommendation are required. Sometimes we receive more, and that's okay. But they cannot be from any family member. They must also have the student's name on the letter and the author of the letter. If the applications do not meet all the requirements, the reviewers let me know for a final decision to accept or disqualify. Now, judges must not be ESA or ESA Foundation members. They can be from all walks of life, as long as they have an interest in higher education. Judges will complete the scoring of the applications. They are given a scoring grid for financial income and GPA, and then they will devise a scoring system for the service and leadership section. I can always use reviewers and judges because even though I have a list, not all of them may be able to judge or review for the next year. You can review or judge a lot of applications, a few, or somewhere in between. I just need to know a maximum number. And if a person is new to the process, I usually suggest they start with smaller numbers just to see if they like doing the process. Judges and reviewers often know others who might be willing to assist. But even if you cannot assist with the process, you might know someone who would be willing to be a judge or a reviewer. So just let me know and I will contact them and explain the process and see if it's something they might like to do. So now we get to the judging process. First comes the sorting. So on February the 2nd of every year, I start the process of sorting the scholarships by numbers received for each scholarship to match up with the reviewer and the judges. Then the next step is to assign the reviewers and judges to individual scholarships and upload them to the website. This takes a little while. When assigning judges, I make sure that a scholarship for a specific state goes to someone from a different state. Now, if scholarships are for any student, of course, that can't be done. But I also keep a record of judges, of who judges what scholarships, so they don't judge the same ones year after year. Usually reviewers have 1 to 3 weeks to complete their review, depending on how many applications they receive. Each year, they are given the review guidelines, and when they have completed their review, they let me know if they have any need for a second look for a possible disqualification. As soon as the review process is completed, I start sending guidelines, scoring sheets to the judges with the number of applications that must not have a tied score. Some scholarships have multiple winners, and some winners may not accept the scholarship. So I need to go to the runner-up to secure a winner. When judging is completed and the winners are chosen, I do one final check to make sure the winner application meets all the requirements. Because occasionally I must disqualify an application because they've slipped through the review process and were judged. When all judging and final check of each scholarship is completed, the scholarship committee will do a review of the winner list by scholarship and person to make sure everything appears in order. Then the board officially approves the winner's list. Then we talk about the judging results. Email notification is sent to each winner with the name and amount of the scholarships that they have won. And they also receive some documents, a letter explaining the requirements for the use of the funds, a confirmation form, because I need to know the students' information, their school information, and student ID, because sometimes their school information changes from when they applied to when they actually decide where they're going to go. They also receive a media release form for photos, thank you notes, and personal statements that are sent to the students, sent by the students, and a due date for all the return of all this information. Now, our non-winners are all sent an email of regret with encouragement to try again next year, because oftentimes there may only be 1 point difference between the winner and the runner-up. Payment of scholarship funds. After I receive all the confirmation forms from the winners, I compile a grid for Doug Mills, our registered agent, with the scholarship name, the amount of the scholarship, the student's name, ID number, and their school name. And I send that on to him so he can begin the check writing process. And while Doug is doing that, I'm preparing an individualized letter for each student's school with the instructions about how the funds may be used, the name of the student, their ID number, and the name and the amount of the scholarship that is won by the student. Then I prepare labels with the school's addresses and get everything ready. And as soon as I receive the FedEx package from Doug, I proof the checks, check the ID numbers, the school name, the student's name, and the amount of the check to make sure that everything is correct. And then they are mailed to the school. So what does a check cover? Tuition and fees required to enroll or attend an educational institution. Fees, books, and supplies needed for courses at the educational institution. Now, these items must be purchased through the schools as funds are sent to the schools and cannot be given to the students. No funds are used for room and board. Now, where do we go from here? As you can see, this process does take a village. I can't do it all, and you can't do it all. So what does the future hold? Our goal is to give all the scholarships available each year and to increase the number of scholarships available, as well as increase the dollar amount of the scholarship. As the return on investments increases, we will have more scholarships to give. As more funds are added to current endowments or new endowments established, there will also be more scholarships given. And this is where we can all help. Now, I know this is a lot of information and maybe a lot more than you really wanted to know, but hopefully this has helped you understand the process a little bit better. Always know that if you get a question you can't answer or something you just wonder about, you can contact me anytime.
Well,
Okay.
Kathy and I certainly thank you all for attending. And again, we're available if you have any questions.